Hi, everybody. I am Brian Sutherland. I am an actor, producer, director, jack of all trades. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, actually. I always wanted to be an actor my entire life, but I was made fun of it. I had so many bullies in my life that actually told me that this was a ridiculous dream. But I would make movies on my own. And when I was in third grade, I actually went to an improv school at Ace Academy, and it changed my life. I remember sitting in the movie theaters and watching Ace Ventura and seeing Jim Carrey do his comedy and going, one day I could get paid doing that. And that to me was mind-blowing. So I forced my parents to sign me up for an improv class and ended up doing that class. And then when I was telling all my friends, I just was bullied to not ever really, nobody was supportive. And it killed me inside. So I held that in for years upon years. And I kind of just made my own films. I did my own sketches. I kind of would show my friends here and there. And slowly I started getting a group of people together that really supported my ideas and loved the comedy that I teach. And I would actually, after the movie from Mel Gibson, Ransom, I would dress myself up as a tree and put a giant branch in the middle of a busy road. And then when people had to move it, I'd run out and say, "Give me back my son." So it was a very strange kind of comedy world that I fell into. But once I did that, people started thinking it was hilarious. So I started doing my own comedy and my own sketches. But it wasn't until I was in college that I actually signed up for an actual acting class. And I ended up trying to sing. It was a musical, and I ended up trying to sing a song from Les Mis that was, I think, for a 12-year-old girl, and it was not my right octave range, and I broke down crying because I forgot the lyrics and ran off stage. And then the next day when I checked the chart, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually an ensemble member. So I actually made, the very first play I was ever in was a movie or a play called Good Morning Athens. And it was a gay musical theater adaptation of Medea or something like that. And then once I booked that, I ran to the place that I did the third grade improv class. And I walked in, I was like, hey, I just want you guys to know that I'm an actor now, and I can sing and I can dance, and you guys gave me this career. And he's like, so you can sing? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, you're cast. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're cast in Sweeney Todd. And I ran home and I was like, Mom, I'm in Swanee Dodd. I'm in a musical. And she's like, what? And I was like, I'm in Swanee Dodd. It's a musical. And she goes, I think you're in Sweeney Todd and it's a musical. And I was like, what's a musical? And I had no idea. So before I knew it, I was 20 years old and I was actually in 2 musicals at the exact same time. So it kind of just all launched at the exact same time. I was in 2 shows, and then there was a big audition for a show that was at the Hilton, which was the biggest theater in Eugene, and they wanted 2 contrasting monologues. And so I had a comedic one, and then I thought it was going to be a good idea to have myself, when the comedic jumped up, to jump on the chair and take out a live loaded gun and point it at the director. And that's what I did. So I found a buddy who had a gun and pointed it at the director. The director tackled me and threw me out and called the cops and was like, what the hell are you thinking? And then the next day basically was like, hey, you booked it. He's like, I've never seen somebody as crazy as you for what you're doing. So advice to everyone, don't ever bring a gun, but it did kind of work out. So yeah, I was doing 2 musicals. that was my first like big audition. I never really auditioned for anything. Like I did the Les Mis, fail, and then, you know, the director was lovely and flamboyant, and he was like, we need straight men to be in this show. And that's really why he hired me. But he also was just, I mean, it was an absolutely amazing opportunity. And it's crazy to think that if he would have said no, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I definitely, I mean, thank you, Jack Wilson. He gave me my career by believing in whatever insanity he saw on stage. And to me, that was incredible. So yeah, I did Good Morning Athens, and then I did Sweeney Todd. And Sweeney Todd was amazing. Like, I didn't know anything about musicals, but it still is my favorite musical. That in Hamilton, I was a kid that was obsessed with like Looney Tunes and Animaniacs and the cartoon world that is so like over, like farcical. Like it's just so over the top, and that's kind of how I ran my life. I was like, every poster in my room was all Bugs Bunny and Donald Duck. Like I just loved those characters. So I think that had a huge influence on me. Trying to be kind of over the top, trying to be cartoony, trying to make people laugh. I had a beautiful household. I mean, my parents were absolutely supportive, and I had an older brother, and I would just love to play pranks on him. And I just tried to do pranks, and I tried to, anytime he had a friend over or my parents had somebody over, I would come out naked. And I thought it was always really funny just to be butt-ass naked, just coming out and just like being like, hey, how's it going? And my parents, like, I got grounded for months on end, and they were like, do not come out naked. And it was very fun. So yeah, I mean, they were super supportive. When I actually told them, I mean, I felt like I was coming out of the closet as an actor, where I was just like, I'm a thespian, and you know, they were so supportive. They bought me like, I think one of the top 5 like Oprah books and signed it. And it was like, my dad goes, you can be an actor, but I need you to right now write your Academy Award winning speech on this piece of paper, and then we're gonna close it and I'll give it to you in 10 years. And it was just like such a phenomenal, you know, experience for my, you know, he wanted me to get a business degree, and he was like, I know it's not going anywhere. And I finally, when I was like 18 or 19, did a play called Road's End that was about Vietnam veterans. And we had a whole bunch of Vietnam veterans in the front row, and when we ended the play, they were just sobbing. And I just remember my dad coming up and just being like, you got it. You know what you're doing, and this is your life, and I support that. And that's when I was just like, I broke down crying. I was just like, thank you. Like, you know, he was always one foot in, but when I saw both of them just be there for me, it was amazing. And it's all I ever really wanted to do. I was a big skateboarder. I skateboarded night and day. My brother and I would try to find skate parks and then climb up on the roof and break the window above the skate park and lure ourselves in when they were closed. And so we would sneak into skate parks, and everything was about skate music videos, skate videos, hanging out with, you know, the top pros that we could possibly find. And that, like, I think there's a thing that there's like a rebellion that comes with skateboarding that transfers into acting. Like, I think the rebellion factor makes it, because a lot of the things I do with acting is like, I do play controversial characters. I like to play like serial killers and really aggressive characters that you've hired me for. But I think a lot of that comes from, but like just the world of skateboarding, being chased by security guards and breaking into places to find your greatest skate shop, and skateboarding on roofs, and, you know, doing things that are like semi-illegal, gave me the kind of edge that I have. That sounds really cliche, but I think that helped me a lot, is like running around with those guys. So I was definitely I grew up with people that were like 17 to 20 that were like really professional skateboarders, and I was a 12-year-old kid sneaking out at night and skateboarding through hallways of schools and kind of, you know, living that lifestyle and being mentored by these people that, like, you know, hopefully they're doing well, but probably not the best people in the world. I was the kid, like, I was friends with everybody. Actually, I'd say that in high school, the first thing that got me into acting was freestyle rap. I was actually the only white kid in a group of like 6'7" tall black guys that were all in this freestyle rapping group. And my grandpa was like a very well-known poet, and he wrote these kind of Dr. Seuss poems that I always loved. So I loved poetry. And then when I started performing my own poems, he kind of led into hip hop. And then I got kind of with this group that I think I was a freshman and they were all seniors. And that's when we started kind of performing in the hallways. And it was very strange because I was like, you know, this 5 foot tall white kid with these giant black guys that were like really good and had lived a life that I definitely have not. But they just loved my comedic raps. And so I started kind of rapping. And then I figured out that there was actually a theater, you know, classroom. And so I auditioned once, and my friends made fun of me because I played varsity baseball and football. So I would go eat my lunch outside the locker rooms and just sit there and listen to them rehearse. And that was the closest I ever got, because I just thought people were going to judge me way too hard. So I was with all these different groups of people. I was friends with everybody. But when I had my chance, I would break away and I would eat my lunch by myself in this little corner by this locker and listen to them rehearse acting. And I didn't know what it was that drew me into it, but it was, you know, obviously 25 years later, it was like my love for acting, where I was like, this is all I want. And this is like how, you know, I think now I can be like, I was dedicated. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to follow my dreams. But it did come from this kind of Looney Tunes, Animaniacs, freestyle rap comedy. Weird Al was the first album I ever bought. Like, that type of humor was the thing that drove me to, you know, like, I teach comedy for a living, but I also play, like, I do a lot of heavy dramas. But it was that world that I say when I teach is like reality 1 inch to the left. That world, reality 1 inch to the left, is like the world I wanted to live in, if that makes sense. Like, that's where I wanted to play. And I realized that I could get paid to play in that playground, and that seemed incredible to me. It was like seeing Ace Ventura. Like, when he did that, when Jim Carrey created that character, people fell in love. People either loved him or hated him, but I was like, I loved him, and that was, he was a huge inspiration for me. I mean, I was definitely challenged when there's a thing about skateboarding culture that, like, if people are hitting a 10 stair, you want to hit the 10 stair too. If somebody's trying to do a grind on a rail, that's where you're coming from too. So pushing yourself harder and harder definitely influenced my acting. I always said acting is a tennis match, and like, let the best player win. And so I look, when I'm cast or I'm looking at these actors, I go like, how hard are they going to hit the ball? And when I was very lucky to go to an amazing school, the Seattle Acting School, that only survived for a couple of years. But it was like a boxing match, and everybody was just like going into the ring when we would practice and kicking the shit out of each other. And that was glorious to watch. I actually went up to Seattle to go to Cornish, and it was like $24,000 a year, and I dropped out after 3 days. And I roamed the streets, drunk as a skunk, basically like, what have I done? I've just left Eugene, went up to the school, dropped out, wandering the streets, and I look up, and I sit on the curb, and I look up, and I'm like, Seattle Acting School. So I just rolled into the studio, and there was a free audit night on a Monday, and I saw Meisner acting. That was mind-blowing. It was the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I didn't realize acting could be that intense. And And that's when I was like, it's cutthroat, and I joined the next day, and I was there for 7 years. I never missed a class. But it was a boxing match, and I think that does resonate with the old school skateboarding of like trying to one up each other. And I think acting should be something that, you know, to me personally, actors are the most inherently lazy artists that exist. And it might be controversial, but I'm like, you know, I meet people that are like, I did a little acting in 3rd grade, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I've dedicated my life to this. But like people who play cello or saxophone or are competitive NBA players, like, study that way and practice, you know, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 7 days a week, and do that work. And that's my teacher at the Seattle Acting School had us, before we could even join, had us read all the autobiographies of famous athletes. And that's how you wanted to hit it. And that's like, I mean, he ingrained it into me to be dedicated and to be, you know, method acting, whatever that means nowadays, is my style for dramas. Nobody ever method acts for comedies, but I have to know that I can disappear and something else can take its place with the characters that I play. Besides doing like kind of like jackass videos, I didn't really, I would say, get my start until I was like 19 or 20 years old, which is crazy. The first thing I ever did was this play called Good Morning Athens, where I literally brought in a 12-foot giant dildo and batted down a wall while a farce of Medea rode on top of it. And that was like, I remember being like, telling my parents, being like, come see my show. And I was just like, here I am. And I was like holding this giant dildo. But it was a very successful, hilarious show. So I did that. I did Sweeney Todd. And then I went to Cornish and I dropped out after 3 days. And then I went to the Meisner School, and somebody was doing a casting for a film. I think it was a short film, a director named Eddie Smith. And I was just like excited to be an extra. I was like, this is huge. I'm an extra in this movie. They're actually gonna blow up a Ferrari, which I was very stoked about. And then right before they were about to do it, he was like, hey, do you wanna be the waiter and say these lines? That was like, I think it was like, welcome, Susan. It was like my first lines. And I was so excited, and I just butchered it. I remember they did like, I remember them saying like, take 36. And I was like, welcome, Susan. Like, I just didn't know how to say anything. So that was my, you know, my first kind of dab into it. But then I just decided to like work really hard. As cliche as it sounds, like I just dove in and didn't, you know, I wasn't intimidated by anything anymore. And then I started doing, I did like a web series called, oh God, I can't even think of it. Pete Anderson was the director. But I was like this nasty character who had guns for hands, kind of like Guns Akimbo, like, and ended up having this death scene, but I murdered people in this scene. But I was like so into it, and that's when I realized I was like, I want to play bad guys. Like bad guys have no rules, and that's what made it amazing. And I've been lucky to star in, you know, multiple movies, playing these kind of horrible creatures, but I love all of them. And they're, you know, I refused to do an interview a while ago because they wanted me to do it in character, and I knew that the spirit of the character that I created had gone. And it's, you know, not everyone's style, and some people think it's bullshit, but to me, it's like I dive into acting to create a soul and a spirit of a character, and when they're gone, they're gone. And whether you think that's bullshit or whether you don't, it's just kind of like, that's what works for me. I don't want to see Brian. I don't want to be, you know, the mannequin pulling puppets. Like, I want to disappear. I want you to say action and for me to be gone and for you to believe that that's who I am. I got fired from almost every single job I've ever had before I became like a full-time actor. And I've been an actor for like 10 years, I would say solid. I haven't had like a day job for 10 years. But I knew I was good at it. Like, and I knew that's what made my soul happy, is what I would say. One of the best stories, I was working at a great sandwich shop called the Other Coast Cafe. And my agent called me and said, there's a commercial for the Deadliest Catch, and they want to hire you and take you out on the boat at the Seattle, bay and take you out and film this commercial. And I was like, I got to work tomorrow. And they're like, can you get it off? It pays a certain amount of money. I was like, yeah. And so I called my buddy Pat, who he was the manager, but he actually happened to be in my improv group that I had as like the longest running improv group in Seattle called Quiet Monkey Fight. But he was my boss, and I was like, hey man, I'm throwing up, I'm vomiting, I can't be there, I'm so sorry. And he's like, well, we have this huge order in, and I don't know how we're gonna do it without you. And I was like, I cannot come in, I'm so sorry. Turns out my sandwich restaurant was catering the Deadliest Catch commercial. So halfway through the shoot, when we broke for lunch, Pat comes onto the boat and hands me my sandwich and goes, you're fired. And I was like, yeah, thank you. I'll take my Ragin' Cajun. And that was the best sandwich that was ever made. But I was so I got fired from that job. I used to work at the Multnomah Whiskey Library that opened up, and that's when I booked Gage, that movie I was telling you about. And I was like, hey, I have to be gone for 3 weeks, and this is important to me. And they were like, if you come back, you probably won't have a job. And I was like, I'll take my chance. And so I think there was a lot of risks. Like I said, I didn't really dive into it until I was 20, and I was lucky enough to book a bunch of roles. But like, I finally, when I was gonna go to LA, and when my wife told me she was pregnant, she was terrified that I was just gonna run off. And I was like, this is the most important moment of my life where I can either tell her I'm gone or tell her I'm gonna stay. And I was like, you know what? LA can come to me. And that's what I did, is I stayed in Seattle, I made a career, and then through the grapevine, when I moved to Portland, I actually got picked up by a company in LA called The Celebrity Event, and they found me out as an acting teacher, and I ended up touring around the world with them, and that's what led to me doing Vocal Star. So because of that, it was incredible. I got to teach in Dubai and Switzerland and France and everywhere around the world. When I dove in, it was everything to me, because I think that I had from 3rd grade to college enough suppression, is that the word? Like I was held back enough by peers that when I finally was like, this is me, I'm coming out of the closet as a thespian, that was huge. And so, I remember people, the bullies of my life constantly saying, what are you talking about? You're gonna be an actor? Like, you really think you can do this? And it depressed me like crazy. And so when I actually auditioned for a role, because I was doing hip hop, they actually wanted a rapper, and I auditioned for it, and then they made me sing Les Mis. That inspired me. So I didn't, I never really had that moment of like, I can't do this. I have definitely cried my way through many auditions and being on hold for huge roles, or when a couple, TV pilots didn't get picked up. But in my, 15 to 20, it was like, I had a good life. Like I had, people were very supportive. And we would do these, like I said, we would do sketches. I would go to the bank and take about $100 and make it all in pennies, and then carry it around, and then run into people and get and go, my baby, and it would shatter and pennies would fly everywhere. And people felt so bad, and I would just sit there with a random stranger and take these pennies and put them into a bag. And then I had the Mel Gibson thing where I thought "Give Me Back My Son" was the funniest thing, because when he really said it, he was like, "Give me back my son!" And it was about his son who got kidnapped. But to put a tree branch into the road and then cover yourself with tree branches and run out in the street and grab a branch from a random stranger and say, "Give me back my son," to me was the funniest thing in the world. For me is like, I think your gut instinct is better than any acting teacher ever. You got to follow your gut. And I've been my mom was one that like ingrained it into me. When I was an actor, or when I was like, I'm going to do this, she bought me like a spiritual book. It's all Oprah, but thank you, Oprah. She bought me so many books on basically like following my instinct, meditation. She paid for me to go to like a meditation school and just like really focus. And so because of that, I feel like I knew when there were jobs that I had to book, and I knew when there were jobs that I had to walk away from. I just walked away from a job a couple of days ago where I was like, there was a lot of good things going for it, but I was like, it just did not feel okay. And sometimes everything looks perfect and the paycheck's perfect and everything's good, but I'm like, if I have that instinct that says walk away, I have to walk away from it. And I think that's kind of given me my career, where I'm just like, I have been so blessed and so lucky to not have bad experiences on set. I was doing my best to be an actor in Seattle, but I actually booked Grimm. I booked a couple of commercials. I booked some bigger work in Portland. So I actually, my family wanted to move, and we realized this was the time, but we moved down to Portland with 0 jobs and 0 money and really did it ass backwards. But we did get a house, and, my wife did get a job, but I was struggling like crazy to kind of, try to make this life for myself. And when it came to the point that we were so broke that we were talking about moving back to Seattle and, living with her family or doing whatever we could, I got a text message from my friend Lisa who said, "Hey, there's this acting company out of LA that's just looking for people to sign in kids, and it pays $20 an hour or something like that." And I was like, I'll take whatever I can get. So I ended up signing kids up for this company, called like Celebrity Group TV or whatnot. And it was like a whole bunch of Disney and Nickelodeon stars that offered these opportunities for kids to take classes, and then they would bring in all these LA agents and yada yada. So I just kind of was there to sign up or to sign up kids, and then somebody called in sick, and my boss Adrian, he was like the lead in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, played Esteban. It was like, "Hey, can you go to this classroom and just help these kids run these lines?" And that just slowly, I was like, yeah, I actually have the skills. I know what to do. And I started directing these scenes that were very different than the way he directed it. And then he was watching me one day, and he was like, "Hey, the way you talk about kids makes me think that like you're an acting teacher, like and you understand the art form. Do you want to come to Las Vegas?" And I was like, "Sure." So I flew to Las Vegas with him, and I started teaching classes there. And then we ended up going, all the way up the West Coast, did the East Coast, did Florida, did, everywhere. And I just kind of like fell into it. And so when I wasn't traveling with him, I actually, Jenna Hamblin and Kitty O'Grady had a studio, and I started renting out their studio and doing my own classes. And I just, I never thought this was going to be a thing until, once I started really getting into it, I ended up finding a beautiful ballroom, Lenore's Ballroom, and calling my acting class for adults Improv at the Ballroom. And so we would have this improv, and it was all about improv and clown. Like, clown was what changed my life. And a lot of people don't understand much about clown, but it's like the art of mastering failure. And once you realize that we can be okay with failure, we can be okay with our mistakes, we can be okay with who we are. We fail all the time. I mean, that's why fart jokes are universally funny. But once I understood the art of clown, I knew that that's what I wanted to teach. I felt something. And I went to the Los Angeles Clown School and studied for 2 weeks, and it changed my life because I was like, I'm okay with who I am, and I'm okay with my failures, and I'm okay with if things don't work out. It's all part of like the universe, as cliche as that is. But so yeah, I basically ended up kind of diving into teaching randomly, and then loving the world of clown and combining that with clown and Meisner and Stella Adler work and Stanislavski, and combining all these acting techniques into my own universe. And some of the games that I've created by myself actually were because of my wife, who would be like, what if we did this? What if we blindfolded your students and had them walk across mouse traps in a blind dating blindfolded mousetrap game? And I was like, you're brilliant, and this is what we'll do. And that actually ended up becoming like one of my famous games that people sign up for all the time. So any book you ever start that has to do with clowning tries to define the art of clowning. So it's a very mixed up, jargon of definitions. To me, I would say to master the art of failure, to be okay with failure, to take failure and take your lowest point as an artist and stir that into a stew that everyone loves. If that makes sense. It's taking your lowest moments and knowing that those lowest moments are actually the most glorious moments you've ever had. When I went to a different clown school, and every day we had to show up with a task that we tried to master that we knew we would fail at. So like, I've never played the violin, but I spent 3 days trying to learn Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the violin. And then we came in, and if you look at your audience, if you look at them in the eyes, that's the thing I love the most about clown, is that you have to make eye contact with a human being and stare at them, and then take something that is so valuable to yourself and play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star like you are making your dad as pleased as possible, the dad who never loved you, to play with him. And it's gonna sound awful, like that's the whole thing, but you have to do it with all your hope while making direct eye contact with him. And he laughs, that's called taking the drop. Is that basically like anytime he laughs, you like look down and then you go back and you go, I'm still gonna do it. I'm still gonna do it. Like taking broken, china porcelain and trying to super glue it while making direct eye contact with somebody. That's the failure, like something that you're not good at, something that but you have that heart that's like, it's like a kid in a shitty musical theater program that you're just like, that's my kid, but he sounds horrible. It's mastering that technique. Does that make sense? Like it's so complex, but it's beautiful, because what I do is I take people at their lowest moments and make them realize that lowest moment is the most beautiful moment they've ever had. And that's when I fell in love with clown. Like it's, clown is all disturbed by It and all the weird, clown movies. But I've tried to study every single acting technique there is in the world. And I've libraries, and I've traveled around the world studying with acting. And clown was the thing that basically combined my meditation and spirituality with art. And that combination of letting people enjoy their shitty moments was life-changing. And I've had more actors reach out to me and go, I booked this job because of your class, because of the clown, because of the failure, because of being so goofy. And it brings them so much joy. And it's pure, authentic joy that comes from clown. I've had 3 crazy ass teachers. Like, I don't think I'm that crazy of a teacher. I think I handle my students well and treat them well. But I have had 3 like batshit crazy teachers. My first one was Joe Zingo, and he was the one that when I went in, I was like, I'm in a play. And he's like, can you sing? And he's like, you're in Sweeney Todd. And he was like this gay Joe Pesci character who was just absolutely brilliant, like a mastermind of having 300 people as ensemble members and moving them all around, and a wardrobe artist, and like him and his partner were just absolutely incredible. And they believed in me. Like I was a kid, like I don't want to say off the streets, but I was like, I came in randomly and they were just like, hey, you have a career. And they supported me so much. Like he taught me how to, like, when I was like, I'm going to go to Cornish, he wrote me a letter. Like he was phenomenal. But when I was in college at the University of Oregon, there was a teacher, John Schmore, and he was my first introduction to clown. And he had a class called Presence and Resistance that was mind-blowing. And 300 people auditioned and only 16 people got in. And I was one of the ones who got in. And I'm still friends with all the 16 people that we did this class with. And I think it was for a quarter or a semester or whatever that is. But it was so powerful. And it was like, what are you presenting? What are you resisting? Like, how do we dive into the core of what you are as an artist? And I had to go deep, like to some dark places that I was just like, oh my God, I have to release that. And it was the most healthy thing in the world. And clown was part of that. We even reacted the 7 deadly sins. And so I had him. And then when I went to the Seattle acting school, I had JD Coburn, who had like 7 heart transplants and 17 children roaming the street, like 7 ex-wives. Like there's just the craziest dude in the world. He was like Mr. Miyagi, and he would just smoke cigarettes in the classroom up in the banisters, and you'd walk in and be like, why is that good? And he would just like talk out of his like larynx. It was just like such a weird teacher. But he ingrained skill towards us. He ingrained skill, he ingrained passion, he ingrained education. He like forced us to read books, but also taught us to, like within 20 pages, to throw a book in the fucking garbage, to know when a book is bad and when a book is good, and how to like work with an actor and know when an actor is good and when they're not. And that was so great because it kept me sharp. It kept me professional. So those 3, Joe Zingo, John Schmore, JD, were phenomenal instructors to me. But I made an idiot move that I'm still trying to redeem, is that I reached out to John Schmore, the college teacher, and asked him about a certain game that we played. And I was like, hey, I'm an acting teacher now, and wrote this very unprofessional bullshit letter when I was like, it was like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. But I was just like, I'm doing what you're doing. And he was like the lead theater teacher who had spent 50 years of his life studying this stuff. And I came in like a bullshit amateur. And he wrote me the most scathing like letter, basically being like, I dedicate my life to this. And you're just like, hey, what was that game we played? I want to steal it and do that. So like, I always try to make John proud. Like I never even responded to his email. His email was so hurtful and I deserved every single part of it. But I get it. Like I get it now, and I was too young and I was too unappreciative to like get where he was coming from, of being like, hey, this is an art form, this is precious, this is something that like means the world to people, that can change people's lives, and you're acting like it's just like, oh, let me just take a little bit of this and this and this and steal from you. And I look at that email all the time before I teach a class, just to go like, wow, I was a fool. And one day I will write him. But that's when I realized that like, we need to elevate the art of acting. And that's what the most important thing is that this is an art form that is getting colossally just ragged on through like TikTok videos and Instagram and all that bullshit. But it is an art that is phenomenal and truly deep, and it needs to be elevated to the point where people are working. If actors worked as hard as athletes, we would be monumentally better as people. And that's what I try to do, you know. So I did a film called Ghostlight, and that was like, I was a very young actor and got the lead role in this film, and that was crazy because I was the lead, but I was also like, it's about a guy going into a movie theater that's haunted and living there for 24 hours. So the entire movie was just me. And it taught me a lot about being a lead actor. And then after that, I ended up getting a whole bunch of roles that were, you know, lead roles, but they were dark. I ended up working with the director, Jeff Farrell, who directed me in Ghostlight, in 4 different films. And, you know, one thing, I saw a music video with Jake Gyllenhaal that was about a serial killer, but he was eating food at a Chinese restaurant, and it was just filmed from him living his life eating Chinese food. And I was like, what if we made a serial killer movie about a guy, but we showed his life just casually, just kind of, you know, what does a serial killer do when he's not killing? And Jeff called me 2 weeks later and was just like, the script's done. I'm done. We're ready. And I was just like, and I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. And so we did the movie. We wrote and shot and edited and got distribution within like 6 months. It was insane. We got like front page of Netflix. But it was a role that really kind of defined me because I was like, I have to figure out how to play this character. Like what makes a serial killer tick? What does he do? And I don't know where I got it from. But I started journaling as the character. And I started journaling from age 5. I was like, okay, 5, like after watching documentaries about like babies and where, you know, the mental psychology kind of comes from, 3, 4, 5 is a huge moment. So I just started writing as like a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, and letting that grow until 10, and then trying to write more as like a teenager, but adding the abuse and certain things that were traumatic to make the character tick the certain way. Does that make sense? Like to try to sculpt the character. So I would write up until the day we started shooting and adding stuff that maybe wasn't in the script so that I could end up loving this character. So, you know, there's a thing about, you know, no one enjoys the love of a serial killer, but I have to. Like, I have to know that what I'm doing is okay, and that's where I came from. So I started getting a whole bunch of images, and I filled out like 4 or 5 journals. And the day we wrapped filming, I broke down crying because I was like, he's gone, he's done. So I started doing that with a lot of my movies, especially for the dramatic ones. And sometimes you know it, you know, supporting roles, sometimes you know, like with writers, I mainly had to I didn't do a bunch of backstory on Riders of the Storm. Like I knew that it was mainly in the accent. I knew, like, I can't like sum up exactly how I prepared for that role, besides watching this New Orleans cook from the 1960s, and he had like 70 videos, and I watched it and I took all of his accents and all of his little shenanigans and all of the things that he would do, because once the accent happened, and once like I dyed my hair and I dyed my mustache and I got the fluffy collar and I got the exuberance kind of going through my body, I knew that's how to portray him. So it's always different based off every role. And that one, it's not like I had to go back off, you know, what this guy's childhood was, because he wasn't, spoiler alert, a figment of somebody's imagination. But I wanted to be the fluffiness that you know, Jeffrey Arrington, I love you, came from. Like I wanted to like be his, like, you know, the devil on his shoulder, but it wasn't really based off me like trying to figure out a backstory. Whereas the movie I have coming out very soon, Maysville, it's about an alcoholic father whose child dies based off his best friend's experience, and so he kidnaps that best friend and makes that kid live with him for 25 years. That, like, I was just like day one super in character and wrote a backstory and filled out 5 journals, and when I showed up on set, I was like an asshole to everybody because I was just this horrible character. But it worked for me. I was like, it was based off the author's true story. And so I was like, if this really happened to you and I have to do this justice, then I have to stay in character the entire time. And that's what works for me. It's always healthy, but it's what works. Yeah, I've tried to do my best studying with everybody I possibly can. And with that comes certain tools that go into my tool belt. And so every role is very different. If it's a really hefty role in a drama, I do the journaling. I figure out, like, for me, facial hair and hair length and all that stuff really matters to me. The biggest thing for me diving into character comes from so many different situations of, like, does the wardrobe get me there? Does the facial hair get me there? Does the dialogue get me there? Is there a backstory that is so heavy that I need to go and journal from 5 to the day we shoot? It's always different. It's like Riders on the Storm, I was all about this Cajun actor I found on YouTube who had a cooking show, and I was just like, that's the guy. Like, what if that guy was a serial killer, and how do I impersonate him and get his dialogue right? And I remember, like, taking my kid to school and, like, saying his accent while I was, you know, like, my wife was just like, you have to stop talking like that. That's ridiculous. And I was so into it, and I watched hours and hours and hours. So sometimes it's, you know, but that came out of wardrobe, that came out of facial hair, that came out of a YouTube video. When I did Maysville, I was very much like, I need to feel this guy's pain. There was a scene where my kid is buried and he died in this horrible accident. And so I stayed up all night watching open casket funerals on YouTube. And it was the most devastating. I mean, it sucked so bad. It was horrible, but I needed to know that pain. I needed to look it in the eye to be truthful. And sometimes it's about the truth, and sometimes it's about being a character. The Ghostlight, the first night I slept in the theater. It's considered the top 10 or top 20 like most haunted places in the country. I slept there for a night and had horrible experience of, like, nightmares, and I feel like ghosts tormented me. So it's always different. And sometimes you just throw out the lines. like let's not bullshit the art form. Sometimes you just don't have the time, and you just do the work and you try to add to it. But it's just, you know, there's so many different categories of how to tackle it. I would say, you know, what I was saying before is elevating the art of acting is like, yeah, do your work and try to make people feel like it's not a movie. Like, try to make people feel like you're disappearing in the story. And if the audience feels it, then you will feel it. And that's really what it's about. If the audience doesn't feel anything, then fuck you. Like, you're screwed. It's not easy. it's I've had multiple opportunities, and I've been thankful for my career as like a Northwest artist or whatever you're gonna call it. But if the amount of films I booked got made, I'd be fucking wealthy. I'd be rich, and I would have so much glamour of these projects that I could stand behind. But the truth is that people kind of put the cart before the horse, and I have booked films that never get made, and that part is heartbreaking, especially with me. Like, sometimes I feel like I'm coming off so hard as like, I'm a method actor and I know what I'm talking about, like all this, but I do invest. I do put all the juice into the project, and then if it doesn't get made, it's heartbreaking. I've lost, like I went through, I fasted for 3 months. I lost 45 pounds for a project that never got made, that was based off of like cannibals on this island. It literally, the day I was packing my bags, the film got canceled. I booked a great role in an LA TV pilot that I was the lead for, that had so much money behind it and so much production value and was phenomenal. And literally the day they were about to pitch it to HBO and Cinemax and all these places, the director's dad and mom died in a car accident. Like, it was literally, so before he was coming in, he got this devastating news, and he could not deliver the project. And his partner ended up like having horrible things to happen to him. So it's like, it's a hard career, but you do it because you have to. You do it because you love it, and you do it because those moments of all the no's, like, we're vacuum cleaner salesmen, and we're the vacuum. Like, I'm knocking on doors being like, hey, I'm Brian. I suck, I blow. I like, no pun intended, but I'm just like, this is me. This is all I can do. And sometimes people buy the product, but some people sell the product shittily. Like, it's hard as hell. And you want every project, of course, to be magnificent and of course to be successful, but it's just not the case. I mean, pre-COVID, I would say that I was always looking forward to teaching. I was always looking forward to being like, how crazy can I make my acting class? What can I push students to that they're going to be like, I can't believe this happened? And that's what I really wanted to do. I've been lucky enough during COVID to basically like teach online and still make miraculous things happen, to really make sure that parents were, or the students were engaged, and that they were having these moments. Like, I have video footage of students crying their eyes out through Zoom based off scripts that I kind of worked with. So a day in a life of me is like coaching students through Zoom from Arizona to Washington, D.C. to Australia, and actually trying to sync up those people to all be in the same class too. So I teach a bunch, and I'm trying to figure out how my technique and my acting class transfers into Zoom, and it's actually working pretty well. But it's hard. It's hard to get people engaged. But I just did a class with 26 students, from around the Portland, Seattle region. And then I work for a company called Vocal Star, where I teach musical theater to students. And that I have like 4,000 students. It's like a 4 or 5 day process of getting everybody together and teaching these techniques of basically let us live truthfully through these imaginary circumstances. And sometimes these imaginary circumstances are truthful. It's actually what I could say is like, they're like, you might come from a place of pain and hurt, and that's why we're sharing it in our art. So I'm doing another workshop on like December 11th. That's with like 4,000 singers that need, we're all going to get together, and I'm going to have 5 minutes with each person, but they're also going to have 16 different teachers. So, I work with them. Obviously my child's not in school, but her and I are just kind of spending time writing scripts and trying to make our own movies. And we actually booked a father-daughter role for T-Mobile, which was rad. And she's starting to understand that like these are crazy times, but we get to still be actors. And that's the thing that's amazing, is like to be able to act with my daughter is truly the most amazing thing that's ever happened. And the fact that she booked her second audition and it was a huge, massive commercial, just to do that together and have that bonding experience. So I have, it's not like I look for work. I have agents that reach out to me. Tonight I have like 3 voiceovers that I have to do, but it's just kind of like, during this time, whatever opportunity comes, let's take it and let's do it, and let's still try to remember why we make this art and why we're doing the things we do, because we do it because we have to. And without acting, COVID was the first time in my life, I think like 3 months in, that I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, acting is bullshit. Acting doesn't mean anything to me. I'm done with it. Like, I'm so selfish because the world is in such chaos. And then it took me like another month to realize that I was like, no, that's not true. Like, art is amazing, and we have to appreciate it, and we have to constantly create, because it changes people's lives and it motivates people, and it makes them stronger if they can hold on to something or believe in something or follow a story. So yeah. What's next? The biggest thing I look forward to is getting back to teaching. I think I doubt myself as a teacher, and then I realize what amazing experiences I have with my students and how unique the workshops that I do are. And I'm trying to look at myself as an artist and going, what could a teacher do to me that would make me be like, this class was mind-blowing, and creating that. But a lot of it has to be in person. Like, it's just like, I can't lie. It's like, it's gotta be in person. We have to deal with this stuff together. So I'm looking forward to creating more classes. And honestly, I think because of COVID, that we will become a tighter knit community of artists. Like, I think we'll always go back and go, hey, we fucking did this together. We lived through this year, these 2 years, who knows how long it's gonna go. But I wanna sit there and I wanna like hold hands with my students and cry our eyes out and go, we're actors, we can do this. We are in this together. We survived this. And that to me is very important. Like, movies will come out and you will star in movies and you will make movies. And I'm excited to see, if I make the cut for a Nicolas Cage movie called Pig, coming soon. But I want to just connect. I got into this industry and I got into this career because of connections, because of like Jack, who gave me my career, who just said yes to me. Maybe because I was just like a straight dude. Like, because Joe, who's like, we need somebody, because of John, like all these people grabbed me and said, you're doing this. And that was amazing. And so I want to give these kids and these adults this experience that just says, you're doing this because I believe in you and I love you and I know that you're an artist and I want to support you being an artist. So that's what I want. I want people just to elevate the art of acting and make it something special.